Hey, seventh grade. So we've been spending a lot of time talking about the Romans, right? How they started off as a republic and voting for the leaders and eventually became an empire. Guys like Julius Caesar, Caesar Augustus, okay, so on, taking over, expanding everything, and being the sole person in charge. But a lot of people are asking, hey, what was it like to actually live in Rome for the regular people, okay? Not for the leaders, okay, or the rich people, but what was it like for just the average citizen? Well, let's check it out. We're going to talk a little bit about the patricians, the rich people, and the plebeians, the poor people, and what it was like to live there. This video on the Nearpod, check this out. This kind of explains what it was like to be a teenager, because a lot of y'all just turned into teenagers or you're going to be soon. So check that out. It's going to be like if you were living back in Rome, what would life be like? So the Roman family, it was a patriarchal society. Patriarchal means that the men are in charge. And so in the Roman family, the father was in charge. His word was law. So whatever he said, that's what happened. Okay, so he was in charge. The father also was in charge of arranging the marriages. So they didn't have dating like we have dating in the United States culture, where people, you see on like movies and TV, where people are like kind of interested, they talk, they go on some dates, you know, maybe they date for a while if it goes well, get engaged, get married, start a family, that kind of stuff. Like it wasn't really like that back in Roman times. And it's not really like that in a lot of parts of the world. But in the Roman times, they had arranged marriages. So basically the father would set up his kids with other people, right? And arrange the marriages. So there's no like dating. It was like, hey, you're going to go marry this person because I said so. And for the most part, the reason why they would arrange the marriages or the criteria they would use is they didn't really care if you liked the person. They didn't really care if you thought the person was attractive. The question was, hey, if you marry that person, will it make our family more powerful or will it make our family wealthier? Okay? So that's what they cared about. Was in marriage was, is it going to make our family more powerful? Is it going to make us wealthier? So that's what they were doing for their arranged marriages. Okay, it was not about love. Now, kids in Rome. Most Roman boys and girls did go to school together until about age 12. Okay, so just kind of like elementary school here, into middle school here. Now, here's where the split happens. Around age 12, sons of poor families would go to work. Okay, start working in the family business, or go, if they're farmers, out to the field to work. Maybe they were going into some kind of manufacturing, making something, right? Maybe they'd go be a servant, something like that. At age 12, sons of rich people, patricians, the wealthy, they're going to go start their formal education. So they're going to learn more about reading, grammar, writing, music, the arts. Specifically, when they're 15, boys would go enter school to learn rhetoric, which is basically speech writing, or how to be a good public speaker, and get ready for their political career. Remember, Rome was a very political society, and so if you were in a rich family, you probably were going to get involved in politics in some way, so you had to be good at public speaking, campaigning, all that kind of stuff. Some boys did go to private schools or get sent away to boarding schools in Athens or Alexandria, some of these famous cities that we know are known for their intelligence and their schools. And they would go there to study philosophy or art or medicine or science. Okay? Just kind of like in the ancient Greek tradition. Now, here's just kind of a picture of some boys at school. So obviously it does look a little different than our classrooms. Here the boys are listening to the teacher talk. They're writing down notes on tablets. Okay? Set up a little different. Girls, they're going to receive different kind of education. When they hit 12, their formal education stopped. The daughters of poor families would go to work. Okay? Either helping to raise the kids and run the family and run the house, or they go to the family business and start working, okay, get a job as a servant, something like that. The daughters of the patricians, the wealthy families, they're going to give, basically get private lessons at home. So their families would bring in tutors. And in fact, the wealthy women, they had a lot of time on their hands because the wealthy women had servants. So they don't have to run their own household, do any of the chores. So a lot of Roman women, the rich ones, were just as educated as the men because they had a lot of time to learn. Okay. Now, some women did run businesses in Rome. Wealthy women, like we said, had slaves to do a lot of the housework, so they had time to study art, fashion, and literature, and reading, and they would take chariot rides out in the country to visit their friends, okay, socialize. So it was good. Life was good to be a wealthy woman in Rome. Okay. Here's kind of an artist's rendering of some wealthy women in Rome, kind of in their nice fashion, their nice gear to go socialize and have the nice cushy life. Extended family. Again, the Romans, very political people. So your cousins, your uncles, your aunts, all this kind of stuff, those relationships, the reason they were so important was because you were expected to help your cousins, your aunts, your uncles, these extended family members. You're supposed to help them politically. Okay, so that's why those relationships were important to people in Rome, is because, hey, if your cousin is running for consul, okay, you're supposed to be out there campaigning. You're supposed to be out there trying to get them votes, right? So that's what the role of extended family was, to help the family get more power. Now, folks, I do want to show you this chart. This is a chart of U.S. cities and their estimated population. We've got huge cities in the United States. New York City, NYC, 8.5 million. Next closest, we've got almost 4 million. Los Angeles, then we get a little smaller, almost 3 million. Chicago, 2 million. Houston, Philly's up there, 1.5 million, 1.5 million for Phoenix. Okay, and we keep getting smaller and smaller from there. In ancient Rome, at its height, okay, the city of Rome had about 1 million people. Okay, so even though Rome was huge and the city was huge, 1 million people is no joke. That's a lot of people. It still is significantly smaller than modern cities. Okay, still smaller than modern cities. And we know that in the city, the common people, okay, not so much the rich people, but the poor people, they ran into a lot of problems. Right? It was very crowded. There wasn't enough housing for everybody. The air was polluted. There was crime. There was a very high cost of living. Okay, taxes were high. Things were expensive. Many Romans couldn't find jobs. Very few jobs except for maybe construction. And they had to pay high taxes on almost anything. We know those publicans, those tax collectors, were ripping people off. So life was kind of tough, especially for the poor people in Rome. The rich people, let's talk about their houses for a second, kind of cushy. Now I'm going to describe it. Some of it's going to sound really similar to houses today. Some of it may be a little different. So the homes of the rich people, they were called domuses, or domus. And basically, they would have nice marble walls, colorful stone floors. This is going to sound kind of funny, but windows made of glass. Now, you might be looking at me and be like, Mr. Hildebrand, all of our windows are made of glass. That's a more modern thing. Back then, a lot of the windows were just holes in the wall. Okay, you might have a shutter or door or something to close it if it's really bad. Most of the time, it's just a hole in the wall. And if you don't want the sunlight coming in, you just put like a curtain over it. Okay, so you've got insects coming in your house all the time. You've got birds coming in your house. Okay, it gets cold in the wintertime because their windows were just holes in the wall. In the rich people's homes, though, they started experimenting with glass and making really nice glass windows. So for us, it seems normal, but for them, that was the upgrade. Okay? Now, they had furnaces with heat inside their homes. Again, that doesn't seem that crazy because a lot of homes in the United States, even ones that aren't rich, okay, have heating. It wasn't that way back in the day. Okay, it wasn't that way back in the day. They also are going to have water brought in pipes into their homes. So they had some indoor plumbing, which again sounds funny because a lot of homes have sinks and toilets and stuff in the U.S. You don't have to be rich to have those things. Maybe average middle-class families have those things too. It's not a big deal. Poor families have running water. But in ancient Rome, it wasn't that way. Okay, the poor families would have to walk blocks, sometimes miles, to get their water. This is maybe an artist drawing of what the inside would have looked like. Very fancy. Okay, kind of reminds me of like a resort, a really fancy Mediterranean resort. It would have been like a mansion today. Like today, rich people live in really nice houses or mansions, something like that. That's kind of similar to what the patricians in Rome were using. The homes of the poor people. Okay, most poor people in Rome, some lived on farms out in the country, but most in the city lived in what were called islands. Now, these aren't actual islands. That's just the nicknames they gave to their apartment buildings. They lived in these huge apartment buildings that would take up whole city blocks. There's an estimated 26 blocks of apartments for every one domus. Every one rich family, there were 26 blocks of apartment buildings for poor people. So there were way more poor people in ancient Rome than there were rich people. Now, these apartment buildings, they were very crowded, very cramped. The construction wasn't the greatest. They had a lot of problems with buildings collapsing and crushing people. They had a lot of fires, because people would be trying to cook some stuff in there, and they didn't really have kitchens. They would also be burning trash sometimes, or trying to heat their little apartment, and so these things would catch fire a lot as well. They didn't have good sewage systems or trash removal, so that stuff just got thrown in the street, even human waste, like when they go to the bathroom. Okay, so lots of disease. So it wasn't super pleasant. Now, what did they do for fun? Well, they loved playing games, okay, especially gambling, even for money. They played dice games. They played board games. They had these things called bathhouses, which we'll look at a second, which were kind of, I want you to think of like big jacuzzis or swimming pools where they'd go to hang out. They also had gymnasiums, sports stadiums, libraries. They'd go to theaters and watch plays. There'd be musical shows. Sometimes they'd go to exercise. People would go and give lectures or talks. Or sometimes they just like to hang out. Okay, so some similar things to what we do today. Here's pictures of what the bathhouses would have been like. Again, think of like a big pool or jacuzzi. People were just going there to hang out. Some were warm, some were cool. Okay, kind of like a social club. Everybody in the neighborhood would go down there to hang out. The public games. So they love their sports, specifically chariot races and gladiator games. They had huge stadiums. In fact, Circus Maximus, their biggest stadium, held over 200,000 people, which is twice as big as the biggest football stadiums in the United States. So these were massive stadiums. And early days in the Republic, when people were trying to get votes and they were voting for their leaders, a lot of politicians would pay for the games to try to get some free votes. Okay, that's free. And then during the Empire, to keep people happy and entertained, the emperor or the government would often pay for the games for people to go see. Chariot racing, they'd hook the horses up to the carts and race them around a track, just kind of like NASCAR today or horse racing today, Kentucky Derby kind of stuff. But yeah, they had these big oval stadiums. Here we got some Romans playing dice, playing board games. Okay, they loved sports, they loved entertainment, they loved games. Okay. Gladiators. Now this is where we're watching the video in class where we're following the life of some gladiators. Basically, this was fighting for the entertainment of others. I want you to think of like boxing or MMA, mixed martial arts, stuff like that. It was fighting for the entertainment of others, but in the gladiator games, sometimes it resulted in death. Okay, it was very intense. Most gladiators were either slaves or prisoners of war. Sometimes they were criminals, or sometimes just poor people trying to pay off debts. The gladiators would have coaches or managers who would set up the fights, who would train them. A couple gladiators were rich people, but not many. Those gladiators usually just wanted the fame or the kind of the adrenaline rush. They would have big parties before, and fans would take bets on who was going to win, and they'd gamble on the matches, and people would go down to the stadiums to watch. Okay, a lot of these fighters ended up becoming very famous. They were like the celebrities and the athletes that we have today. That kind of level of famous. Now, sometimes they were fighting people, but sometimes it was animals versus people. So sometimes they put wild animals, lions, tigers, those kind of things, dogs, in the arena for people to fight as well. Okay. The Romans definitely very bloodthirsty people. So here's this is from the movie Gladiator. This is an artist painting. We're going to watch a movie in class about some gladiators to learn a little bit more. Check out my next video where I explain the project for this, and if you have any questions, hit me up on email or in person. All right, folks, stay tuned for instructions.